Hello, good evening, dear students. I'm sure that I'm audible to you, and now I will start my presentation. Is it audible, Ramisha? Okay, thank you, dear. Thank you. All right. So I had three lectures. Two I have already completed, and this is the last one. And in the beginning, I have told you that the learning objectives for this will be the to describe the factors that makes biochemical reaction spontaneous and thermodynamically favorable. And this we have covered in our first lecture of bioenergetics, where we have understood what is entropy, what is enthalpy, what is delta G, and what is an open system, and how this system and surrounding are interacting so that the spontaneous reactions are happening. And by virtue of that reactions, all the living system is working, including ourselves, our 70 trillion cells are working on the basis of that one. And if any reaction which is not favorable, how they can be coupled and where the ATP input is required, right? Means once the ATP input is required, body needs to produce the ATP, and how this ATP can be generated. For that, the respiratory chain mechanism we have tried to cover in second lecture, and in which we have understood that the electrons are transferred from the NADH to oxygen through a chain of three large protein complexes, complex 1, 2, 3, and 4, we have said. The more important was NADHQ oxidoreductase, Q cytochrome C oxidase, and cytochrome C oxidase. Basically, they were giving electrons to coenzyme Q, which is also known as ubiquinone, because it is a ubiquitous quinone in biological system. And this ubiquinone is a hydrophobic quinone that diffuses rapidly within the inner mitochondrial membrane. And some of the reductant were passing through complex 1, 3, and 4, and some were passing through complex 2. And we have calculated the energy for that also, that when they are passing through complex 1, how much energy is produced, and when they are passing through avoiding complex 2, how much energy is produced. And on top of that, we have learned that certain compounds, they were inhibiting at certain stage of complex 1, 2, 3, and 4, and their name, they will be called inhibitors. These inhibitors are important to know. For example, carbon monoxide poisoning we have understood, and cyanide poisoning we have understood. I will reiterate in the coenzyme Q again, because often when you are appearing in the examination, there is a short note in that, right? This coenzyme Q is basically quinone derivative with a long isopeptide tail. And the most common form of in mammals is basically coenzyme Q10. There are various types of coenzyme Q. And these quinones can exist in three oxidation states. In the fully oxidized state, which is having keto group, in addition of one electron and one proton, results in the semiquinone, that is a hydroxyl. And this semiquinone form can be easily deprotonated to form a semiquinone radical anion. So because of this addition, the addition of second electron and proton generates ubiquinol, and the fully reduced form of coenzyme Q, which holds its proton more tightly. Thus, for quinones, electron transfer reactions are coupled to proton binding and release. And this property that is a key to transmembrane protein transport. So usually it is called what is a coenzyme Q or Q cycle. So you can read it for a small short note, right? The most important is the transfer of electrons down the electron transport chain is energetically favored because NADH is a strong electron donor, and molecular oxygen is an avid electron acceptor. And we have understood about the redox pairs also, right? However, the flow of electron from NADH to oxygen does not directly result in ATP synthesis. Means if you start flowing the water from the top and in between, if turbine is not there, what will happen? Electricity will not be generated. But if water is falling from the waterfall and in between the turbine is fixed, then you will be able to generate the electricity. Similarly, NADH is ultimately going to donate the electron. But if directly, if you are thinking that it will combine with the oxygen and then ATP will be synthesized, it is not like that. So there is a mechanism for that. And how this ATP will be generated given by a scientist. His name was Michel, and it is called the Michel hypothesis, right? This chemiosmotic theory. What it says basically, it explains that how the free energy generated by the transport of electrons by the electron transport chain used to produce ATP from ADP PI, right? What it says basically, this says that the electrochemical potential difference across the membrane, once established as a result of proton translocation, inhibits further transport of reducing equivalents through the respiratory chain unless discharged by back translocation of protons across the membrane through the ATP synthase, and this in turn depends on the availability of ADP and PI. Means the most important part of this total chain is proton pump. What happens basically? These are basically understanding oxidative phosphorylation is a very simple, but it is a very complex process. So little bit intricacy in this complex situation, I'm sure that you will bear with me, right? Electron transport is coupled to the phosphorylation of ADP by the transport of protons across the inner mitochondrial membrane from the matrix to the intermembrane space at complex 1, 3, and 4. We have already understood. See, if you the protons here, 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 and here, right? Once they are on this side, their transfer to this side will generate something that is called proton gradient, and this will facilitate the production of the ATP. What happens for each pair of electrons transferred from NADH to oxygen are roughly 10 hydrogen ions are pumped. If you see at the complex one, through the complexes which you already know, what is that? From NADH, what happens? There is FMN which is converted, then it goes to iron sulfur in the complex one. The 4 protons are going inside, then they are passed to the coenzyme Q, and again 4 protons are going. And in the complex 3, there is a complex process which you know, again cytochrome B, cytochrome C, then iron sulfur, and then finally through the cytochrome C. In the complex 4, you are getting the 2 protons. So you are getting 4 plus 4 plus 2, right? What happens further? This creates an electric gradient. If you see here in the inner side, matrix side, what is happening? Negative, and protons are going here. Protons are pumped across this membrane as electron flow through the respiratory chain. Outer membrane is there, inner membrane, and intermembrane space positive charge is there. In matrix, there is a negative charge. So this electric gradient with a more positive charge on the cytosolic side of the membrane than the matrix, and what will happen? The pH, a chemical gradient will be also changed. The cytosolic side of the membrane is at lower pH than the matrix side, right? Then what will happen? The energy proton generated by this proton gradient is sufficient to drive ATP synthesis. Basically, what happens? These proton gradients are not basically helping the ATP synthesis in the true sense. Rather, they are allowing the ATP to be released because ATP cannot per se cross the membrane. So the proton gradient serves as a common intermediate that couples oxidation to phosphorylation. Means here, if you enlarge the Christie part, complex 1, complex 2, complex 3, complex 4, electron transport chain. This is an electron transport chain, and finally oxygen is going to be converted into. But this generates the proton motive force in intermembrane space, and this machinery, which I will be discussing very soon, protons are going, ATP synthase is producing, ADP is combining with the PI, and ATP is produced, and that is released. This ATP synthase complex is very, very important. This is a multi-unit enzyme complex that is called ATP synthase complex 5. This synthesizes ATP using the energy of proton gradient generated by electron transport chain. What it does basically, this is also called F1, F0 ATPase. Why it is called ALChem? Because the isolated enzyme can catalyze the hydrolysis of ATP to ADP and PI, right? Means once proton gradient is there, this complex 4, ADP and PI combine and ATP is produced, then it has to be released for the utilization further. And this ADP has to go inside. And then once the ATP is hydrolyzed, PI, then ADP, again ATP can be reused. In the chemiosmotic hypothesis, process that after protons have been pumped to the cytosolic side of the inner mitochondrial membrane, they re-enter the matrix by passing through a channel in the membrane spanning domain. This domain is called F0 of the complex 5, and this driving rotation of the C ring, what is C ring? I am coming to that part of F0, and at the same time dissipating the pH and electric gradients. So it helps in the release. This rotation in the F0 causes conformational changes in the 3 beta subunits. What are the structures? I'm coming. Of the F1 that allows them to bind ADP and PI, phosphorylate ADP to ATP, and at the same time it releases the ATP. And one complete rotation of the C ring produces 3 ATP. Now let's see the structure. If you see the structure, this is a large complex, right? Here protons will go from this part F0, and then they are connected by a stalk, that is a gamma, and protons are going. This catalytic having head. Actually, I was trying to find out the diagram of this mini machinery. Oh, sorry, video of this one, but I found it, but I could not download it. You can try to find out and download it how really this ATP is produced and how ATP is released. Now let's come to the structure. As I told you, there are two parts, main part. One is F0. This F0 is a water insoluble transmembrane protein, right? This particular part is F0. And F1, this is a stalk that is called gamma, and a stalk and headpiece. This portion is water soluble, and this is a peripheral membrane protein. So in the two parts, means in the intermembrane space, if you see in the bilipid layer membrane, here this is a F0 and stalk, and this is a F1 headpiece. Let us see the composition, because understanding composition and structure is important to understand how this ATP is generated and how it is released. The composition of 5 types of polypeptide chain: 3 alpha, 3 beta, 1 gamma, delta, and epsilon. Right? The headpiece is composed of 3 alpha beta subunits. If you see alpha beta, alpha beta, alpha beta, and this delta is basically forming part of the catalytic side, and each beta subunit contains a catalytic site for the ATP here synthesis. The headpiece is held stationary by a delta subunit attached to a long B subunit connected to A subunit in the membrane. If you see alpha beta alpha beta alpha, then delta, this is connected by one another unit that is called B2, right? This is a basically headpiece part, right? Let's come to the composition of the other part. There is a composition A1, B2, and C912. If you see A1, and there are different C1, C2, C3, C4, C5. They are part of this one. And there is another part that is called B2. Means this is a part, you can say part of F1 or F0. They are connecting, so they are intermediate in between. The inner membrane protein or contain that proton channel for the complex projects into the matrix. Here, this is projecting to the matrix side. and the almost 12 C subunits in the membrane form a rotor. These C proteins are just like a, if you have ever seen the motor of the fan or any small moving machinery, there are the wires on that one. They are similarly, you can say different wires in the 12 C units. These are the, and they are acting as a rotor. This is attached to a central asymmetric shaft composed of epsilon and gamma here. If you see here, this epsilon, then surrounding to that one, the C units are there, and connecting one is a gamma with the headpiece of that one, where these alpha beta are there, and delta is also connected to the B2. Structure is given in any book, you can go through. Now, this ATP synthase catalyzes the formation of ATP from ADP and orthophosphate. How it does basically? The terminal oxygen of ATP. Here it is ADP, here is the oxygen. The terminal oxygen of ADP attached the phosphorus atom of the phosphate here. It is not inorganic phosphate is there here, right? This phosphate to form a pentacovalent intermediate. Here if you see oxygen, then phosphate, this high phosphate group has come and this has made the pentacovalent intermediate. And once the pentacovalent intermediate which then dissociates into two parts, ATP and the water molecule, right? Proton which flows through the ATP synthase leads to release of tightly bound ATP. This produced ATP is basically tightly bound. It is not in the free form. So what happens? The proton which is flowing through the ATP synthase complex, from inside 10 protons are coming and outside again coming. This basically ATP forms readily even in absence of proton motive force. How it has come? Means if you see the ATP formation in the ATP synthase complex to formed, but until unless there is not a proton gradient, this is not released. So indirectly you can say ATP forms readily even in the absence of proton motive force, but the ATP release from synthase needs proton gradient. This was given by Paul Bayer. This puzzle was solved by binding change mechanism given by Paul Bayer. What he said basically, that ATP synthase is rotatory engine, and this is called world's smallest motor. This starts means movement of proton drives rotation in a particular direction. Like here, suppose this proton is going, this going in the C subunit, and rotor is starts moving, and then stop along with the stop. This also start moving the upper part. Here, what happens? Combination of ADP and PI forms the ATP. At the same time, when the proton gradient is more, this ATP is released. So proton binds to the C subunit and exits through the A subunit, right? How does proton flow through the F0 drive and rotation of the gamma subunit? See, I'm taking little more time so that you can understand how it really happening. So let us see the mechanism depends on the structure of C subunit. As I told you, there are 9 to 12 C subunits span, and each polypeptide of alpha helix that spans the membrane, there is Bartic acid residue in the middle of second helix. What it does basically, a subunit having two proton half channels that allows proton to enter and pass part. Here if you see, here matrix half channel and the cytosolic half channel is there. From this subunit, this allows to pass, right? And the influx of proton, suppose proton is coming here, through the proton channel turns the rotor on, and the proton channel is formed by C subunits on one side and the A subunit on the other side. So on both the sides there is a formation of proton channel, right? So proton enters from the intramembrane space into the cytosolic half channel to neutralize the charge on the aspartate residue in subunit. So this is the function of the aspartate, right? So if you see the broader, the step by step, what is here happening? If you see, matrix is there here, protons are there, protons are into the intramembrane space, right? When with the this charge neutralized C ring can rotate clockwise. Just think of the clockwise rotation by one C subunit moving an aspartic acid residue out of the membrane into the matrix half channel, and this proton can move into the matrix resetting the system to its initial state. So slowly and slowly, clockwise, they are moving. If you see here, then here is a proton, then here, then proton has moved ahead, then proton has moved ahead, and then proton has come here, right? So there is movement of this proton. Just another schematic diagram. Basically, this ATP, Paul Bayer said that this can be in the three state. One is the loose state, one is the tight state, and one is the open state. So what happens if you just imagine all the C structures, open, loose, and tight. Here the ATP, first it says ADP and plus PI. ATP has synthesized, right? Now open state is there, ADP, PI has come. In the second stage, energy again, second stage, then what happens? This is rotated. Now it was here, now it loose state has come to this place, and at the open state, the ATP has shifted from tight state to open state, right? And once the open state proton gradient is there, ATP is reduced, ATP is removed, water is removed, and now the further ATP is at the ATP T side. So this way, by just clockwise rotation, you can say it's keep on moving. So energy from the electrochemical gradient is used to change the conformation of ATP synthase and the subunit so that the newly synthesized ATP is released. And this energy is transmitted via rotation. That's why I'm telling that the basic function of the rotors are not to produce the ATP, rather to release the ATP. Basically, these 12 C subunits which are hypothesized, and it takes 12 protons to complete one turn of the proton and synthesize 3 ATP. But we are saying that the 10 protons are only coming, so that one complete cycle, at least 12 protons are required to rotate and they are going to produce the 3 ATP in one cycle. Now, as I told you, coupling is a very important. So coupling in oxidative phosphorylation, in normal mitochondria, ATP synthesis is coupled to electron transport chain through the hydrogen gradient. And when you are increasing or decreasing, one process has the same effect on the other because they are the coupled reaction. For example, there is a hydrolysis of ATP to ADP and PI in energy requiring reactions. This increases the availability of substrate for ATP synthase and thus increase the proton flow through the enzyme. Secondly, electron transport and hydrogen pumping by electron transport chain increases to maintain the hydrogen gradient and allow ATP synthesis, right? Certain drugs we are using, they can block these oxidative phosphorylation, right? For example, oligomycin, if you take, this drug binds to the F0. Here, if you use synthase 5 complex, that's why I'm focusing on this one. Otherwise, there are many drugs are there. This drug binds to the F0, hence the letter O, domain of ATP synthase, closing the hydrogen channel, preventing a re-entry of protons. And once the re-entry is prevented, what will happen in mitochondrial? This will prevent the phosphorylation of ADP to ATP, right? Because the pH and electrical gradient are also attached to proton gradient, so the pH and electrical gradients cannot be dissipated in the presence of this drug. So what will happen? Electron transport chain stops because of the difficulty of pumping any more protons against the steep gradient. And this dependency of cellular respiration on the ability to phosphorylate ADP to ATP is known as respiratory control and is the consequence of the tight coupling of these processes, right? There are certain proteins which are uncoupling proteins. What they do basically, these uncoupling proteins occur in the inner mitochondrial membrane of the mammals, including human beings. These carrier proteins create a proton leak. Means, suppose protons are pumped through this F1 and F0, then they will produce a ATP, and otherwise, suppose there is protons are leaked, that is, they allow proton to re-enter the mitochondrial matrix without energy being captured as ATP. So what will happen? The energy is released as a heat, and the process is called non-shivering thermogenesis. Means in this case, what is happening? energy is not captured as a ATP, rather this is produced as a heat. So these uncoupling proteins create proton leak, allowing protons to re-enter. Here if you see, proton is there. So in place of going to the complex, this one, ATP synthase, there is a uncoupling protein and through this proton is entering. Because this is not having machinery to produce the ATP, ADP phosphorylation will not happen. So this will be generating the heat. In children, this protein is basically very useful in the name called the thermogenin. This is responsible for the heat production in the brown adipose tissue of mammals activated by fatty acids. What happens in brown fat? Unlike the most abundant white fat, uses almost 90% of its respiratory energy for thermogenesis. Means if you see in brown fat what happens, not much ATP generated, rather the heat is more generated in response to cold in the neonates and during arousal in hibernating animals. This is an important mechanism. Bodies have designed in such a way that the beautiful machinery is there, which not only produces the energy, rather it produces heat. And in human, uncoupling proteins like UCP2, UCP3 have been found in the humans, but their significance remains unclear why they are present and what is their function. Still, we are not exploring in detail. This is a natural one, right? Now let us come to synthetic uncouplers, means those who can dissociate the oxidation and phosphorylation. In the electron transport and phosphorylation can also be uncoupled by compounds that increase the permeability of the inner mitochondrial membrane to protons, right? The classic example is 2,4-dinitrophenol. What it does, basically what is it? A lipophilic protein carrier that readily diffuses through the mitochondrial membrane. There is no need to remember the structure and all those things, but you just remember this uncoupler causes electron transport to proceed at a rapid rate without establishing a proton gradient. Means simply by diffusion, if you see cytosol low pH is there, matrix is a high pH, this can diffuse. So what will happen? This will not establish a proton gradient. This is similar like a UCPs, right? Energy is released as heat rather than being used to synthesize the ATP. In high doses, aspirin and other such released uncoupled oxidative phosphorylation. This explains the fever that accompanies toxic overdoses of these drugs. Means sometimes when we are taking the higher doses of aspirin, what happens? Or any salicylate we are taking, they uncouple the oxidative phosphorylation and there is a more production of heat. That's why in place of temperature down, there is a increase in the temperature if you are giving the overdose of this one. Let us understand a little bit of the membrane transport systems. The inner mitochondrial membrane is basically, as we have already discussed, they are impermeable to most charged or hydrophilic substances. However, it contains numerous transport proteins that permits passage of specific molecules from the cytosol to the mitochondrial membrane matrix. This is basically ATP-ADP transport dependent. The inner mitochondrial membrane requires specialized carrier to transport ATP and PI from the cytosol. As we have already discussed this part, I think this part need to be omitted. Yeah, this is very important. I'm repeating this one as electron. Transport of these reducing equivalents, how they are transported. The inner mitochondrial membrane lacks an NADPH transporter. Even then it is transported, how? An NADH produced in the cytosol cannot directly enter the mitochondrial membrane. Then how you will be utilizing that one? The two electrons of NADH, also called reducing equivalents, are transported from the cytosol into the matrix using substrate shuttles. How they use this basically? These are substrate shuttles. One is a glycerophosphate shuttle. I think this will be detailed out during the metabolism also. What it does in the glycerophosphate shuttle, the two electrons are transferred from NADH to dihydroxyacetone phosphate. This when glycolysis will be taught. phosphate by cytosolic glycerophosphate dehydrogenase. And the glycerol 3 phosphate produced, this glycerol 3 phosphate produced is oxidized by the mitochondrial isoenzyme FAD is reduced to FADH2. And this goes to the coenzyme Co of the electron transport chain and oxidizes FADH2. The glycerophosphate subtle, therefore, results in the synthesis of, because this is a one step omission of one cycle. So this will produce only 1.5 ATP for each cytosolic NADH oxidized. This calculation we have done in the last class. One is malate aspartate subtle, which produces NADH rather than the FADH2. What happens in this one? In the mitochondrial matrix, therefore, it will yield how much? ATP? 2.5 ATP for each cytosolic NADH oxidized. By malate dehydrogenase, our oxidostate is reduced. Malate. Here oxidostate, then malate, and from malate NADH in this one, this complex one of the electron transport chain, and if it is going through the complex one, it will produce the 2.5 ATP. And this transport protein carries malate into the matrix. As we have already discussed, that glycerol 3 phosphate shuttles are abundant in skeletal muscles. Oh, sorry, this is our information passing right now. The malate aspartate shuttles are mostly present in the hepatocytes and the cardiac myocytes. Now, we have understood that bioenergetics is important, electron transport is important, oxidative phosphorylation is important, and this is happening in the machinery. Which machinery? Powerhouse of the cell, that is called mitochondria. And we know that mitochondrial DNA is different from the nuclear DNA, and mitochondrial DNA produces 13 proteins roughly, having the different properties. And if anything goes wrong in this mechanism of the oxidative phosphorylation or the mitochondrial defect is there, there will be a disease. So, human mitochondria contains 2 to 10 copies of a small circular, roughly 16,000 kbps double stranded DNA molecules that makes up approximately how much? 1% of total cellular DNA. 13, I have written luckily, because lucky 13 proteins of approximately 120 proteins, polypeptides are required for oxidative phosphorylation. And they are coded by mitochondrial DNA and synthesized in a mitochondria. Remaining mitochondrial proteins are coming from cytosol, transported into the mitochondria. So, if any problem is there, there will be major human mitochondrial defect, and this will produce lot many diseases. This table I have taken from Harper. You can have a look of it, and the properties of mitochondrial DNA. If you want to read, I can tell you, but it is again copy of the. But the best part is this one, that this structure will be taught to you in the genetics part. So I think I need to omit at this stage. Anything is special? 7 right. Okay, leave it. So inherited defect in the oxidative phosphorylation. The mitochondrial DNA, as we know that this is maternally inherited, because mitochondria from the sperm cell do not enter the fertilized egg, right? Defects in oxidative phosphorylation are more likely a result of alteration in mitochondrial DNA, which has a mutation rate about 10 times greater than that of nuclear DNA. That's why this is common. Tissues with the greatest ATP requirement, for example, central nervous system, skeletal, heart muscle, kidney, and liver, are most affected by defects in the oxidative phosphorylation. This is again table I have copied, and you can have a look of this. For example, examples of disease caused by mitochondrial DNA mutation are one very common disorder, any disorder is not very common, but MELAs are definitely a bit more common than the others. So liver hereditary optic neuropathy, what will be the symptoms? There will be acute visual loss and possibly other neurological symptoms. And common mutation is point mutation. And inheritance is maternal, definitely. This is MERRF, means myoclonic epilepsy, other neurological symptoms, and red cell fiber skeletal muscles are there. Red cell fibers. Again, this is a point mutation and maternal inheritance. KS syndrome, this is a progressive external ophthalmoplegia. pigmentary. These are the complicated terms. Slowly and slowly, when you will come to the final year stage, I'm just giving you passing information so that you are aware about if there is a defect in the mitochondrial DNA or in the steps of oxidative phosphorylation, there are the certain disease. The most important thing is MELAS. Encephalopathy, lactic acidosis, and stroke-like episode. There is a point mutation, maternal inheritance. Where is the point mutation? In the tRNA leucine gene. Position is 3243. MELAS, you read on your own about the MELAS, please. This is important because this may be asked as a short note. Now, I'm coming to what is the role of mitochondria and in apoptosis, basically. What happens? Normally, cells in our body are growing, multiplying, but suppose at some point of time, every cell is signaling to each other, and suppose a particular cell is not functioning normally. So, adjoining cells want to say to that cell that please you die. Means, suppose infection is there, then what is happening? Because of inflammation and other processes, they are dying. But sometimes there is a need in the body itself that yes, this particular cell die because this, if it is persisting for long, then it can damage the body itself, right? So the process of apoptosis, you can say, are programmed cell death. Means cells adjoining, they program the death of that particular cell is necessary. But suppose there is a defect in mitochondria, then will it be possible or not? This part let us see. So the process of apoptosis or programmed cell death may be initiated through the intrinsic pathway by the formation of pores in the outer mitochondrial membrane. Means if you want to kill the cell, you have to just puncture or make the pores so that the material inside is leaking or not properly utilized. So what will happen? They will die. So these pores allow cytochrome C to leave the intermembrane space and enter the cytosol. And once in the cytosol, cytochrome C, in association with pro-apoptotic factors, suppose they are there, activates a family of proteolytic enzymes, basically caspases, causing cleavage of key proteins and resulting in the morphologic and biochemical changes characteristics of apoptosis. What happens? If you see here, this DNA is damaged, then certain proteins like BAX, if you see here example, a pro-apoptotic protein, is inserted into the mitochondrial membrane here, right? BAX is inserted over here, right? What will happen? The cytochrome C is released, right? Out of these complexes, only one factor, suppose, is released, cytochrome C, into the cytoplasm and activates the another protein, APAF1, right? The caspases of proteolytic here release is there. What will happen inside this caspases 9 activation is there. These combine together and they form a complex that is called apoptosome, and this apoptosome lead to the proteolysis of the proteins which are not required, and this way the cell will die. And this caspases proteolytically cascade in the activated to the cleaved cellular protein and DNA, and apoptotic cell shows bleeding in its plasma membrane. Means if you see, DNA is not fragmented in the infected cell. Here what happens? DNA is fragmented, right? So this is called the apoptosis, and the later on the cell will die. Now, I am giving you total overview of the oxidative phosphorylation, what we have done so far. If you recall, from the oxidative processes such as TCA cycle and beta oxidation fatty acid produces the NADH and FADH2, right? This NAD and FADH2, what happened? Cursor is here. Goes to the electron transport chain, right? And these electron transports, which are comprised of what? FA1, FAD containing dehydrogenases, coenzyme Q, cytochromes, and cytochrome A3 and cytochrome oxidase. This, suppose there is a leakage of cytochrome C, what will happen? The cytochrome C leakage, this will be going for the apoptosis. right? And if they are complete, then they are the only component that can react directly with the oxygen, right? So these are important. And once they are reacting with the oxygen, what will they produce? They will produce combining and finally water, right? But the most important, we are not going for that. We are looking for ATP generation. So this electron transport chain leads to electron flow and transport of the protons from the matrix to the intermembrane space, creating what they create? They create an electrical and pH gradient. And across the intermitochondrial membrane, what will happen? They will allow the proton to re-enter the mitochondrial matrix, this one, and passing through the F0 channel complex 5 into the ATP synthase complex. This ATP complex, what it will do, there will be a conformational change in the F1 domain of ATP synthase, and this will allow the synthesis of ATP from ATP and PI, right? And if you see the visual picture of total one, always remember one thing in biochemistry, if you want to remember anything for longer time, don't mug it up. Have a visual picture, have a flow diagram in your mind all the time. For example, by seeing this only diagram, you can write any answer in as in the examination, right? So visualize it. Reduce substrate NAD, NADH, oxidize separate in inner mitochondrium. What is happening? They are going to complex 1, generating the proton gradient. Complex 3, generating proton gradient. Complex 5, protons, protons, protons. And this proton in the complex going to the other side and helping in the ATP generation and the release of ATP. So in the three classes, with the background of the bioenergetics, with the information, what are the structures are there. Finally, where we have landed, how to produce ATP, how to release ATP. If there is a defect in mitochondrial gene, oxidative phosphorylation will not happen properly. Death may be happening naturally due to presence of the uncoupler proteins, but they are not the unnatural because they are helpful in the neonates, like thermogenin is a natural uncoupler which produces heat and that keeps the child warm, right? But if there is a defect somewhere, sometimes this, which is again a process useful, that is called apoptosis, right? The most important thing, electron transport and phosphorylation are tightly coupled process, and the proton gradient is the common intermediate, and inhibition of one process thus inhibits the other. That's why we have seen that there are many compounds which we are inhibiting at the different steps. Names of those we have already discussed. Just to summarize it, for example, if you see electron transport chain inhibitor is at the complex 1 will be rotenone, electron transport chain inhibitor again amityl, antimycin A at the complex 3, at the complex 4 cyanide and carbon monoxide. Azides can again electron transport inhibitor at the complex 4. 2,4-dinitrophenol we have discussed, uncoupling agent. Where they act, site of action is transmembrane and proton carriers are there. Pentachlorophenol similarly uncoupling agent, and oligomycin we have already discussed that they inhibit the ATP synthase. So ATP synthase, once that inhibited, the ATP generation will not be there. I hope with this much information, the objectives of this class, that you should be able to describe the factors that make the biochemical reactions spontaneous is done. Describe the process of ATP biosynthesis by oxidative phosphorylation is done. List the inhibitors of ATP biosynthesis of oxidative phosphorylation. Mind it, in objectives it is list the inhibitors of ATP. If you read the different books, many inhibitors are there. So common inhibitors I have listed, which if you read, there are more. But suppose tomorrow some other inhibitor is asked to you in the examination, don't blame it. You can, that's why you can refer 2-3 books so that more and more inhibitors you come to know. But the mechanism is very simple. Electron transport inhibitors are there. They may be affecting complex 1, 3, or 4, right? And finally, What is the role of mitochondria in apoptosis? We have already understood, and the mutations of mitochondrial DNA in the pathogenesis of myopathies. This particular part, I was trying to find out that what is the role in the myopathies is not much available for you in a very simplified, therefore a very complex process. So this particular little portion is not completed. What we will do, we'll take the problem-based learning, and in that one, this DNA pathogenesis of myopathy will be discussing. I hope this much is sufficient information related to my topic. If you are having any question, query, although because of Corona, we are not going to meet physically from tomorrow onwards. So this is going to give us opportunity to organize problem-based learning. Today in the morning itself, I was discussing with my head of department. He was saying we will be discussing in the problem-based learning. So I'll make the questions about it and I'll be discussing in that one. I hope this is enough for you. Thank you. Thank you for listening.